Welcome everyone, this is Judge Schlackman, and for this video I'm going to be speaking about a topic that's really kind of esoteric, looking at things sort of multidimensionally and metaphysically in relation to the current challenges and crises that appear to be occurring on our planet, in our country, America in particular. So the topic I'll be using, or the phrase I'll be using to discuss this and title this video, is Drowning in Atlantean Trauma and Grief, the Great Flood. So if we think about this concept of Atlantis, many of you have probably read things and seen videos about it. There's a lot of myths and legends about Atlantis. This is an ancient civilization that existed on Earth thousands of years ago, and it was referred to by Plato and other historical figures. And a lot of information about Atlantis has come from channeled sources, from people receiving communications from the spiritual realm, also people having contact or interactions with extraterrestrial beings. And there's a lot of common themes. There are also many people who have experienced meditations or past life regression hypnosis sessions who have distinct memories of being alive and incarnated during the time period of the civilization of Atlantis. And there were different stages to the development of that civilization, its rise and fall, you could say. That civilization had influences from cultures or societies beyond our planet, so there were extraterrestrial beings who played a significant role in the development of the Atlantean civilization and the technologies that they had at that time. Now, a key or pivotal point in the planetary history and the history of Atlantis goes back to approximately 13,000 years ago. For those that aren't aware, the planet Earth has a certain precessional cycle, a wobble on the axis, and this has to do with the astrological ages as the Earth moves in relation to the Sun within our solar system. So there's the ages where you have approximately 2100 years under a particular sign, one of the astrological motifs. So there's the age of Leo, the age of Pisces, the age of Taurus, the age of Aquarius, etc. And so we would go through all 12 of those astrological ages in a period that would correspond to approximately 26,000 years. And at certain key points in the cycle, there tend to be cosmic or astronomical phenomena, in particular related to the Sun, that have an impact on planet Earth. So these are periods that may be in some way catastrophic or cataclysmic, where major Earth changes occur. And there's a great deal of geological information as well as information recorded from cultures all over the planet, anthropological, archaeological, and geological, all those forms of information that point to the same particular phenomena that occurred approximately 13,000 years ago, which involved some form of shifting of the Earth's axis where there was great flooding all over the planet, where many civilizations were wiped out to a great extent, and there was a small amount of survivors. And those survivors scattered to high elevations on the planet, areas such as the Himalayan regions, Tibet, Lake Titicaca in South America, and the Andes in Peru. Also to Egypt. So the civilization that arose in Egypt was created or fostered by people that survived the Atlantean Cataclysm. There's also evidence showing that the culture or civilization or empire that people refer to as Atlantis included the region that we now refer to as Antarctica. There was a great book written back in the 1990s called When the Sky Fell by Rand and Rose Flamath. They're a couple who were researching all of the evidence about that ancient Atlantean civilization and how it was destroyed, how the earth was flooded, and how the different cultures all over the planet had recorded that history within their legends and their myths. So in that book they had come to the conclusion that Antarctica was a key centerpiece of that Atlantean society, that Antarctica was once a very fertile land. It wasn't covered by ice back at that time, 13,000 years ago. And so there's a civilization covering much of our planet, which included Antarctica at that time. And now there are many people who are discussing the uncovering of ruins under the ice in Antarctica, that there's been a lot of secret activity there. And this actually goes back to World War II, when the Third Reich, the Nazis, were planning their future as Germany was starting to lose the war, and they were making an escape. So it's known that many Nazis went to South America, but there's also some pretty clear evidence that they created a base of some sort in Antarctica and kind of continued a covert operation or faction going on down in both Antarctica and South America, and maintaining a significant behind-the-scenes influence upon global affairs, even coming up through the present. So that's part of the Antarctic history that relates to Atlantis. You can view some videos online by people like David Wilcock who discuss parts of that history. But to get back to our main point here, there was a very technologically advanced civilization covering much of the globe at that time. And that civilization had also been quite spiritually conscious. But over time, as the technology became more of a focus and people were caught up in the abuse of that technology and different struggles for power and control on the planet, then the spiritual frequency or elevation of that society in some way seems to have declined. And that coincided with this cycle that was occurring where great earth changes affected the planet, and there were great disasters, great flooding, great loss of life. And when that happened, spiritually, those beings who were incarnated there at that time, who went through those great tragedies and traumas, well, they would carry with them a lot of that emotional trauma, a lot of that grief from the destruction of that great powerful civilization. So if we think in terms of the metaphysical manifestation of things here on the physical plane in our human lives, we can consider that souls are incarnating and going through different cycles and working through different archetypal issues. We have not just the physical body, but we also have different other energetic layers to our being, to our aura or energy field. This includes the emotional body, the mental body, the spiritual body. So we have whatever unprocessed emotions might be held. We have the thoughts and belief systems. We have the memories that are carried on a spiritual level. People often refer to karma, karma being the concept of cause and effect, of how what is carried within one's consciousness will create some type of outward phenomena. So we're in some way balancing things. We're gaining a full understanding of whatever issue we might be processing through going through different aspects or angles of an experience or a topic throughout multiple lifetimes. Now, if we think about emotions, and particularly trauma and grief, well, the water element is the element that relates to emotion. So floods often symbolize overwhelming emotion. So when there's a lot of emotion built up, it may manifest in the external world as some type of flooding with water. And grief is the emotion that we tend to associate in terms of holistic medicine and holistic healing with the lungs. So the lungs corresponds with grief issues that haven't been processed. It corresponds, of course, with breathing. And right now in our society, there's this meme or theme, this idea about a person being mistreated and not being able to breathe. The phrase, "I can't breathe." And of course, anyone who has a lung illness, they're likely to have difficulty breathing. So this theme, this phenomenon, is present in multiple layers or levels. It's kind of an archetypal theme. And so it is played out on the psychological, the emotional level, but also the physical level, where people's energy is depleted, where it's hard for them to breathe, where they're not getting enough oxygen. With respiratory illnesses, including what is currently labeled as the COVID-19 disease, people often have what's referred to as hypoxia, which means the percent of oxygen in their blood is low. And if it's low in their blood, it's also likely going to be low in certain other organs or tissues in the body, which can cause different organs to start to fail. So someone could go into kind of this downward spiral where their organs are breaking down, their body is crashing in a sense based on sustained deprivation of oxygen. So if we think about what happens when a person drowns, they're going through a similar process where their body's getting smothered through lack of oxygen. The water is filling their lungs and they're not able to breathe, and that leads to this cascade of effects where their other organs will shut down and they'll pass on. So those who carry the trauma from the Great Flood, the time of Atlantis, many of them are incarnated here in this current time period. Most, of course, are not conscious of that, but it's not unusual for those who go through some type of hypnotic regression session to access memories from that distant time period. From our soul's point of view, all this is simultaneous. So the past, present, and future all kind of coexist. They're all in vibrational resonance. So if you're carrying that grief, that emotional trauma from that other time, it can overlap into your present lifetime. It could actually be the source of physical health issues or illnesses that you experience. And it could also be a catalyst for you to replay related types of emotional trauma in your present life. And this is one reason why people do regression therapy. They want to understand what might be creating the current conditions in their life from that metaphysical perspective, and to hopefully be able to release the energy from that other time period, to clear that charge, to, in a way, break free of what they might think of or label karma, so that whatever was set in motion or whatever's been carried in the consciousness doesn't have to be externally reflected or manifested in one's present life. You can break out of that cycle or pattern and not need to continue it, based on being able to shift the consciousness to release that energy imprint by accessing the memory and reprocessing it, releasing that emotional charge, for example. So this brings us also now to the idea of what is represented as Atlantis in our modern era, what global culture has dominated planet Earth in a sense in the 20th and 21st century. And this is where we come to the idea of America as the new Atlantis. If we go back a few centuries, there were Enlightenment era philosophers and secret society members who envisioned the so-called New World, the Americas that were being explored back then by the European explorers, as a land to create a new Atlantis, a new kind of utopian society. And America was specifically recognized by people like Sir Francis Bacon as the site where this new Atlantis would be created. So there's the resonance of America with Atlantis, in part through that concept of a new Atlantis, this kind of great dream or vision that was held by those who were members of some of the secret societies, like the Rosicrucians and Freemasons, people who were the modern carriers of ancient knowledge, of spiritual wisdom, as well as some of the secret information about ancient civilizations. So some of the evidence and records of the Atlantis or Atlantean society and civilization were being passed along in an underground kind of way through mystery schools and secret societies. Some of those societies were of a more spiritually positive orientation, some of a more power-hungry, you could say, negative or left-hand path orientation. But they all were carrying this information forward and envisioning how a new society of their envisioning would be created. And America has been influenced by both some of those more positive and more negative spiritual influences. It's been a society or a country that's been the focus of a lot of idealism. So a place where it's been envisioned for people to prosper, for there to be more freedom or liberty, for there to be a more democratic society. So America has been a leader in many ways in terms of creating that ideal, at least on the surface, while at the same time there have been dark seeker societies and kind of this dark global cabal that's been a major controlling influence here in the United States and been using our government, our different corporate institutions, and also having our military play a role as enforcer for their economic interests. So there's been a lot of dark or negative type of activity that people around the world associate with America also. So we can see the contrasts, both of the polarities very much at work, just as they were back in the era of Atlantis, that society which had some positive spiritual ideals that were guiding it, at least for a while. But then as technology and some other influences took precedent, it started to decline, and there were wars with other societies on the planet that Atlantis was involved with. And ultimately, of course, the great cataclysmic earth changes occurred, which wiped out much of the population of the planet back at that time, around 13,000 years ago. So there's an energetic, archetypal, and spiritual resonance between that time period and our current time period as we're going through these cycles. So what's happening now has a lot to do with the unprocessed trauma, the unprocessed issues that were occurring back at the time of Atlantis. So the abuse of technology and power that was occurring back then, and we're confronting those issues again. There was certainly a lot of emotional turmoil back then, and that became overwhelming when the disasters, when the cataclysms hit. So the souls that went through that and experienced it, many of them are likely here on Earth now in our present time, in some way reliving some sort of trauma or releasing those energies, perhaps even physically through some type of illness, to bring some form of resolution to whatever they're carrying within them. This is kind of hard for many of us to wrap our minds around, but if we think about how energies resonate and vibrate, and how there's a harmonic relationship between these different layers, between our spiritual body, our mental body, our emotional body, and physical body, we can see how a pattern that's present on one level will start to resonate and ripple through to the other levels, bringing about some form of external physical experience. So if we think about the flood of illness that seems to be going around, and also all the emotional hostility, in a sense, that's being expressed or displayed by a lot of people, all the divisiveness, all the anger and fear, all of that building up there that can connect to things that have happened in other lives, other lifetimes, other periods of history, and we're just not necessarily conscious of the deep roots of it. We may see things on a surface level. We may identify and point to a virus as the cause of our illness, but the virus is just occurring on a certain layer or level, and there are deeper layers beneath that, which in kind of a chain reaction are creating the conditions for that virus to start to activate and to appear as a correlate of illness. So if you carry some deep grief, that grief is there in your energy field, and it's creating some form of density or constriction in the energy flow, which leads to a shift in the electromagnetic energy coming into your physical body. The actual electrical potential of the cells in your body will diminish, and since everything in our body actually depends upon electricity, then the cells will start to suffer. They won't be able to function to their full capacity. They won't be able to clear out toxic waste. They won't be able to receive nourishment as efficiently as they normally would when you're healthy on all levels. So this can happen sometimes slowly or gradually. Other times it could happen rather quickly. And if we're not conscious of what's going on in our consciousness, in our mind, and in our emotions, it's easy to get caught up or pulled down, in a sense, into those denser emotional states where our energy gets drained or depleted, and a process or chain reaction of illness starts to manifest. We can do things on a physical level to kind of slow down or reverse that process, to keep our physical body from going further or deeper into that state of illness. But it's easier if we're able to remove or reduce the stress that's present on the energetic level, on the psychological level, since that energy flow will have a great impact on what's occurring in the body. And without energy, really nothing that you do physically is likely to have much benefit. So you can have all kinds of great natural foods and vitamins. You can have some potent drug that's been developed. You can have all kinds of things you try to apply physically, but the body actually can't really use any of them unless it has a current or flow of this life force energy going through it. So if spiritually we're starting to withdraw that energy from our body, we'll end up passing on, no matter what type of medical treatment is provided, whether it's mainstream pharmaceutical medicine or some type of naturopathic or energetic or alternative medicine. Ultimately, our spirit or consciousness has the final say, the final role to play in that scenario. So it helps to understand things spiritually, to realize how all these different layers and levels interact. One of the more interesting things about our current social phenomena involves the situation where people started to demonstrate and protest after the incident involving the death of a man named Floyd, who was observed on video being held down and having his breath affected by a police officer placing his knee on the man's neck. So the man was saying, I can't breathe, as he was being held down, and apparently that led to some type of medical incident where he died. And Floyd was the surname of this man, and Floyd is a name where the etymology actually comes from the word flood. So we're in this period that resonates with this concept of not being able to breathe, of being overwhelmed with emotions, of a flood, of drowning. And as I mentioned earlier, with drowning you can't breathe. And when people die, of course, there's grief. So those who are the survivors, those who are still around here on the physical plane, will carry grief with them. And that grief is something that might end up being processed in another life when it's not fully released or resolved in the current life. So I would encourage each of us to consider that we may have grief from other lifetimes that we might want to more proactively identify and process and release and heal in some way, so that it's not necessary to replay what happened at the end of the cycle 13,000 years ago with Atlantis. There may be some major challenges and changes on our planet at this time. This may be an inevitable pattern that's being played out, but we may also be able to have some influence on the extent or severity of the challenges or changes that we go through. A lot of people have made a lot of prophecies and predictions about our current time period, and some of them haven't played out, while others have been somewhat accurate in terms of forecasting what is manifesting here on Earth. So this is a very challenging time period for many of us, a very dramatic time period, but we can also consider that our souls chose to experience this, that this current incarnation that you are here experiencing has a purpose or multiple purposes to it. There are things for you to process, to learn, to understand and master in this lifetime, and this brings some great opportunities. So we can consider the idea that with crisis comes opportunity, with great stresses and challenges we have the chance to develop even greater strength and mastery. So rather than being afraid of what's unfolding, rather than feeling like we're a victim, we can shift our perspective, seeking to see things more from our soul's point of view, seeing this time as an opportunity, a chance to reflect upon who we are, what's important to us, what are our priorities, what level of consciousness are we focusing on? Are we stuck in survival mode, in conflict or power struggles? Are we coming from a place of compassion for others, no matter what we might think of their beliefs, of their actions or patterns? Or are we in a rush to judge and condemn everyone that we don't agree with? Are we seeking to communicate better, to have some more clear connection with the other beings, the other souls that we're sharing human life with? Or are we trying to silence other people? Are we censoring ourselves and others? Are we afraid to communicate? Are we afraid to process the differences we may feel we have? Are we afraid to discuss our different ideas, our ways of looking at the world, the paradigms that we might be attached to, and so on? And then, of course, we can come all the way up to our crown chakra. And of course, corona means crown. So the virus that people are concerned about that's been going around is named for this particular top level energy center, our crown. And if we're at a time period where we have the opportunity for great spiritual progress, then we have the opportunity to activate our crown more, to be more spiritually connected, in a sense to be prepared for some type of a process of ascension or graduation, where we complete the different aspects of mastering earth life that our souls came here for within whatever cycle of time our souls have chosen to immerse themselves in. And now as we collect and integrate all these experiences from all of these lifetimes, we're ready for kind of this crowning achievement of mastering the earth incarnational cycle, of perhaps moving past this and being prepared for whatever is next in our soul's journey. These are some very interesting things for us to consider or ponder. We often look at things more on a linear or superficial level without considering that there are deeper layers and explanations for things. And for what's happening on the earth right now, there are definitely archetypal patterns that are unfolding and manifesting, and much deeper layers to the things that we're observing. For those that are interested in spirituality as well as in holistic health and healing, I invite you to watch some more of the videos on my YouTube channel. You can also visit my website, which is phinsights.com. That's spelled PHINSIGHTS.com. I appreciate each of you and would like to wish you a pleasant day. Namaste.